the last portion is talking about the determination of Pluto moving from a primary planet to what it was supposed to be, and then moving it. Was it 2015 that they said this, or was it 2000?
The IE, are you talking about the IEU thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 2006.
2006.
So it was actually the year that New Horizons launched.
Right, because you didn't get data until
2015.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a long time of, are we there yet?
Yeah, I bet. What, 9 years, right?
Yeah, 9.5.
Nice.
So from the point of view of a planetary scientist, as I am, I would say that the IEU basically made a embarrassing mistake.
Okay.
Really, it was a bureaucratic problem. So they're in charge of naming things, and lots of Kuiper Belt objects were being discovered and given names and so on. But then here's, Eris, which is comparable in size to Pluto. It's like they have a mechanism, they have a process for naming small bodies, but they don't have a process for naming planets. So it's like, well, holy crap, what are we supposed to do? So we either have to figure out our process, or we just figure out a way to not have to name these things as planets, because then we can use our existing process. So really, it masqueraded as science, but it wasn't really a scientific move at all. It was they didn't even obey their own bylaws. Proposals are supposed to be published, 6 months in advance, so people can think about them and debate about them, and then vote openly. And they did it all very secretively, and they were worried about public backlash if the public knew that they were working on this. And it folds into what is the purpose of taxonomy? Why are you actually putting things into categories? And planetary scientists you'll always hear planetary scientists apply adjectives to the planets. I mean, planet is a very general term. I mean, it's almost as generic as world. It's a big round thing that's not a star. But you'll always hear planetary scientists putting adjectives on that. So we're talking about rocky planets. And there's 5 of those: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Moon, and Mars. Mm-hmm. And there's gas giants. And sometimes people will group Uranus and Neptune with the gas giants. And sometimes people will separate them off and call them ice giants, because they really, Jupiter and Saturn are primarily hydrogen and helium, and Uranus and Neptune are primarily heavier elements. People will talk about icy dwarfs. People will talk about primary planets and secondary planets. So like the moon would be a secondary planet because it goes around a primary planet, the Earth, which goes around the sun. But something like Pluto and Charon would be a binary planet in a sense, because they both go around their common barycenter. And you could imagine 2 equal Earths going around their common barycenter. I mean, neither one's really a satellite, and you can't call one a primary and the secondary if they're the same.
Right.
But does that make them not planets anymore? No, of course, they're still planets. They're just qualified in these different adjectival ways. Community, that's the way the scientific community uses it. And the IEU thing is really just a big distraction. Really, nobody in the planetary science community pays much attention to it, to be honest. To be honest, the public shouldn't either. So some of where this came from, a funny thing happened on the way to the space age, where around the turn of the 20th century, so 1900, all of this new physics started being discovered. Einstein's special relativity and Bohr model of the hydrogen atom, and very soon quantum mechanics and all of this stuff. So it was super exciting because you could finally understand how stars worked, and very soon the discovery of the expansion of the universe, and the fact that galaxies were these separate, vast swarms of stars in a universe that suddenly was much, much larger than anyone had ever conceived. And people lost interest in planetary science. There was not much happening in planetary science from the early part of the 20th century to the space age. Oh. And during that time, there was still this folk etymology or I should say taxonomy of planets, which basically came from astrology. It was like planets should be this small number of culturally significant things that, that have influence, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so when the space age came along and we were sending missions to Mars and Venus and soon the outer solar system, everyone got interested in planetary science again, but people adopted this folk taxonomy that basically came from astrology. And that's what got adopted by the IEU. It's like, okay, they have to be influential, and there can't be very many of them. That's essentially the IEU definition. And it's going to go down in history as a terrible embarrassment for that organization. But they haven't owned up to it yet, but they'll get there.
we really shouldn't worry about like these the sociological ordering of planets. It should be more like these are behaving like binary planets. This should be a binary planet, or
Yeah,
this should be an icy giant, or this should be a
yeah.
gaseous giant. Like
I mean, the more we have, the better, because you can compare and contrast, and each of them presents interesting uniquenesses of its own. It's like, if you don't care about dinosaurs, you don't need to learn a whole lot of dinosaurs. You don't need to learn any dinosaurs. But kids that care about dinosaurs, boy, they can wow you. They can memorize hundreds of dinosaurs. And we probably ultimately, if you count the moons, the large spherical moons, we probably have well over 100 planets in our solar system.
yeah.
And as a planetary scientist, I'll take them.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the checklist of becoming a planet is pretty simple. And one more thing, I guess, maybe that we should probably add, and that we talked about before we jumped into this recording, is that the IAU said that Pluto wasn't a primary planet because it didn't clear its neighborhood. But you and I both know if you placed Mercury or even Earth out into the Kuiper Belt, it wouldn't clear its orbit. So
Right. I mean, how important to you is it that it clears its orbit? If that's important to you, and that is important to some dynamicists, they might like that definition. But, so there's definitions, different people will use different definitions in different ways. But
that's
if
fair.
what you care about is the processes that are at work on the surfaces and what they're made out of and how they were made, you don't care if it cleared its own or not.